Hey everyone, Walter Crosby with Helix Sales Development, your host of Sales and Cigars. So today we've got an interesting episode with a fan of the show and a brother of the leaf. He and I have so many things in common: sales, cigars, bourbon. So Ed Porter with Blue Chip CRO. Great story around how he learned the trade. And how he's used that to help other entrepreneurs and other companies take the next step and scale up their organization. So, and then we talk a little bit about cigars. We actually talk a lot about cigars. So go grab a cocktail, grab a cigar, strap in for another fun episode of Sales and Cigars. So Ed, appreciate you taking some time to join me on the podcast today. I've been looking forward to this. So thanks for welcome.
Yeah, thank you. I think we're going to have some interesting things to talk about today, business related and personally.
Well, there's when we first engaged about this, there was a couple of hot buttons that you hit, right? Sales, the cigar part, and then you added bourbon to the mix, right? So we can have all that. I think one thing we'll stay away from is the college football thing. We could probably
Oh yeah.
that
Oh
might be
yeah.
one difference. Seeing
Right.
you're in
I th-
Columbus and I'm a graduate from that school up north. Um,
yep.
we'll leave that aside. Um,
Yeah, we'll put aside our professional sports affiliations. I love calling college, especially Big 10, professional sports.
Well, the Big Ten and the SEC,
Yeah.
and I'm frankly, I've become disillusioned. I'm not a big fan of our coach. Just I don't care how much wins he's done in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
He graduated the same time I did, and was never a fan. We can have that conversation over a bourbon and cigar later.
Ah, yes. That sounds
Uh,
like a great conversation.
yeah. Um, all right. So why don't we start with what you're smoking, um, and then what's in the glass, and we'll go from there.
All right, sounds good. Well, I'm here at one of the local lounges in Columbus, Ohio, Governor's Lounge in Grandview. They've got three locations, good group of guys that run it. So I'm here smoking a Padron 7000. This is my go-to. This is when I know I want something, the consistent draw, the taste, the flavor, everything about it. This is what I go to. In fact, last year I did a one of my email newsletters was touting the Padron 7000. So
Hmm.
it's something that I love. Certainly my go-to. So that's the cigar I got burning right now.
Awesome. And what's in the glass?
Glass is Angel's Envy Rye. So I'm starting to become a rye person and trying to expand the palate. But Angel's Envy is a good sweet rye, and I did a distillery tour last year. Picked up a few bottles, and then they're starting to become a little bit more popular in circulation in Ohio. So they're now shelfers, which is great. So
Cool.
it's a good rye for me to go to. I like it, nice and
It's
sweet.
it's it's the cool thing about cigars and bourbon is that you can experiment and try different things um, and make comparisons. There's people who drink wine and you can do that with wine, but there seems to be certain people get a little pedantic and about their wine. To me, like bourbon is just as complex, but yet simple, right? And you know, guys like you and me can go grab. It doesn't matter. You can be sitting on your deck. You can be sitting in a cigar lounge, have a bourbon and a cigar, and you immediately have something in common, and you can have a conversation and solve the world's problems over
There you go.
over
And
a glass.
I'll tell you, that's one of the things I've heard you talk about a lot on the podcast episodes is it's a great way to start a conversation of what are you smoking? And it goes from there. And you can then sit for hours and just go on and like you said, start solving the world's problems. And then when you start talking politics and religion, maybe it's time to get up. But before that, that's the icebreaker, right?
I think so. It doesn't matter. I've been in weird parts of Pennsylvania and West Virginia. I've been in Vegas. I've been in Florida, and rarely is it weird, right? Rarely is it do I feel out of place in a
Hmm.
cigar lounge. Just because you have that commonality there. It's
Yeah.
fun. So
Yeah, I've
and
heard you talk about the what is it, the patio at Mirage out in Vegas. And I
Mhm.
my usually go to is the either the Monte Cristo inside Caesars or the Baccarat bar at Bellagio. Those are usually my two spots.
That's a great one. And so I found one more the last time I was out there, um, the Davidoff store, which is right in the strip, literally like right on the strip, and it's on the
And it's a
north.
lounge?
It's a lounge. They have a bar. There's a big patio area outside.
Oh wow.
We were there a couple Thanksgivings ago, and coming out of COVID, and I forgot to book something in Florida, so we ended up in Vegas because that's what people do, I guess. And it was the place where, I told my wife and daughter, like, if you can't find me, I'll be over here in this little chair, right? And it was right across from the Wynn. Um,
Oh,
and
okay.
they were just amazing people. They knew their cigars, they knew their cocktails, and even my wife would sit there and outside and have a drink and read a book while I was. That was the last time I was there. I was watching that Michigan Ohio State game a couple years
Mm.
ago,
Which
which I
one?
found the
That
the
wasn't that
the
wasn't the one that we didn't show up for, did it?
well, it's the first one Harbaugh was able to win. Is how I look at
Yeah,
it.
right. That's what I was
Um,
thinking. Is like that's the one that our team didn't show up. We
yeah,
just kind of forfeited.
yeah. It sort of felt like that. But we said we weren't going to talk about college football,
Yeah,
so
right.
but the idea of cigars and bourbon, it flows with sales with what because I'm going to call you an old sales guy like me. Not that you're old, but you've been around the
Oh, I
block.
am. I got the grays. I got the grays.
So let's talk a little bit about how you got to being an entrepreneur and doing, the blue chip CRO. So let's talk about how you got there. It's got to be an interesting story.
Yeah, it is. If you'd asked me when I started working that I want to be in sales, the answer would have been no. And I started off in the outsourced contact center space. I was in college and it was a part-time job for me, and it was good money and pretty flexible schedule. So I started there, and I was fortunate because I had a boss at that time that I despised, and I just vowed to never want to be like this guy.
Mm.
And I'm fortunate to have that experience because I do think that paved a lot of who I am or who I want to be, or likewise who I don't want to be. And in the call center, you learn so much. You're talking to people. People are only calling for problems. They're not calling to say you're doing a great job. They're calling because they have problems. So you get to understand temperament and how to de-escalate or how to try and persevere through problems for like that. And you get to work with in the outsourced world. You get to work with a lot of different clients. So I got the experience doing inbound service, inbound tech support, outbound sales. Um, Inbound sales, and there was through lots of different industries as well. So I kind of started there as a call center rep, and eventually started working there full time and got promoted up the chain, where I found myself at 25, 26 years old, had about 1,000 people reporting up to me over a couple different sites. Got to spend some
Well,
time in the Philippines, opened a site in Indiana, led a team or led a site in Ohio. So I learned a lot about leadership and working with people. And there's so many transferable skills when you're working with people through other people. So when you're leading leaders who are leading other leaders and so on down the chain, you learn a lot about people and how to motivate, how to engage, how to take care of people. And there's a lot of transference there, especially when talking about sales. It's the same thing with customers. You're trying to take care of them, you're trying to help them make great buying decisions. So that's where I got my start, was in the call center world. And people that I worked with there, just they built a tech startup that was a call recording system. So I went to go work for those guys, and I got to give a hat tip to the founder, Ray Bohack, who's a friend of mine. But he said, I want to build a channel division. So we're selling direct and I want to sell through resellers. And I think you're the guy to do it because you understand the buyer so well. We're selling to call center directors and
Hmm.
leaders, and we're selling a software. So you have an ability where you can then work with these resellers, teach them the buying persona, and drive our product. So I didn't really know much about sales at that time, but I learned it. And I learned a lot about marketing. We had to market, and when you're selling to the channel, you're marketing and selling twice. You're marketing to resellers and you have to market to end users, and you have to sell to resellers and you have to train the salespeople and you have to train the implementation people and then you have to sell to the users. So it was a very complex sale in many dimensions, but I learned a lot about selling and structured selling and trying to sell through partnerships, which was pretty difficult. And we
Hmm.
had a very really successful venture there. They since sold the company and then sold it again. So it was a good run back then. Then I get recruited to go build an inside sales team for a large field sales organization through Cisco Foods, and an eye opener. That was selling through distribution. We were the distributor, and in some cases we were the manufacturer, but it was taking somewhat of an archaic industry, predominantly
Yeah.
field sales, 100% commission, and trying to build this inside sales organization. And the president of the company at the time said, our number one competitor grew their company and they're doing really well with an inside sales team and we want to take advantage of it. So that was my role there, and our sellers were full cycle sellers. They were prospecting and hunting, they were selling, they were servicing, they were handling the phone calls about damaged items and returns, and I mean they
All on the
were the
phone.
epitome of the all on the phone. Yep,
Wow.
all centrally, and they were handling everything. So it was trying to balance, how do you service versus sell? How do you account manage versus penetrate? And it was all trying to sell 30, 40, $50 boxes of stuff. And when you talk about nickel and dime and margin, this was a great experience that I had. I learned so much there. This is how I really learned about, I would say, a lot about this problem when in with organizations is, a selling problem isn't just a sales problem. It's not just hire people and give them a quota and then you grow your company. This is where I really learned the how marketing needs to be aligned, how you're serving customers, and are you really delivering what you're saying you're going to deliver in the sales process? Because you have one throat to choke. These sales reps were the one, they were the true full cycle sales reps. So that was a great experience, doing that for 8 years. We built that organization and they're thriving now. I'm still in touch with several people. It's a strategic part of that whole business. The company's been growing. I'm really fortunate to see this too. My old boss at the time is now the president of that company,
Hmm.
and he's just done a great job. He was one of the best leaders that I've had in my career, and so I'm really thankful that and I think he just took over this year. I
So
think he just made the announcement like a month ago.
you've gone from having the epitome of the worst sales manager type person to be like, okay, that's what we don't want to do, and you sort of end your corporate career with somebody who's exactly what we want to emulate in developing. To me, that's a leader who can develop the next layer of leaders, right? Recognize talent,
Yes.
nurture it, coach it, help it, right? That's that's unique, especially in the sales group, sales organization, because face it, we don't. Most sales managers are like the first guy, right? They don't really know
Right.
what they're doing, and it's not their fault necessarily, because nobody ever showed them.
Exactly.
But it
And
is, it
that's
is,
it's the skill and will, and it's often a skill. You're right. You see that a lot.
yeah.
So that
But
was
it
at
comes.
that company, and oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I think there was one other thing there that I heard you say that the alignment with the marketing department and the sales department, and but getting the vision of that, of the president, of the CEO, the business owner, depending upon the entity, that the guy who's starting to create a channel, that having that vision and letting those people know down the chain, as you say, that this is the vision and this is what you need to do every day, every week to help fulfill that vision. This is the authority you have, this is the responsibility you have, and this is the latitude you have. That to me is the part I like working on, is working with that entrepreneur to help him or her realize that they haven't really communicated what that means in the roles of their employees. Like the high level stuff is, sure, we understand this is great. We're gonna increase our customer experience. But how do I do that in my role? I'm just a BDR or SDR or salesperson, right? That leader's got to be able to drill that in and help that. And it sounds like that's one of the things that you were able to do in the corporate world, is translate that to what they need to do to be successful in their role in the sales organization. Is that right?
Yes, yes, and that's one of the most important things that really drives me is, as a leader, leadership is not about doing, it's about helping people do. And a lot of times it gets lost, and especially when you're leading other layers of leaders, it's even harder. You're further removed from the doing work.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where in the call center, I was so fortunate because I got that experience to fail, the experience to learn from failures and understand what works and what doesn't. And ultimately, that's kind of what makes, I think, a successful journey is, whether it's sales, whether it's marketing, whether it's customer service, product development, whatever it is, there's the doing aspect of it, and then there's being shown and taught how to do it, and then there's being showing those people how to teach those other people, and it's a great dynamic. So that's really what I've enjoyed learning, is the people side of the business, and there's a lot of transference from managing people and then how you emulate that into managing customers and a buyer journey, and really figuring out how those handoffs happen, how do they get supported properly, and ultimately how do you turn a buying customer into a repeat customer, and then into, of course, that loyalty mode. So that's been a great experience at that company, where you had one salesperson that really did everything. And then from there, I went and got recruited to be the chief revenue officer for a company that had aspirations of being acquired. They had been around for a little bit, had decent market share with a particular customer type, and wanted to grow. The boat was leaking a little bit, so they were experiencing a decent amount of churn, and so that was really my goal, was to help them get into acquisition mode, and we did. We were able to do that. My core focus there was understanding marketing, and more so the customer success team, to figure out how do we plug the hole. And my driving metric that I kind of imposed upon myself was revenue per employee. We needed to focus on margin and profitability, and we needed to look at the customer journey and understand how do we plug the hole so that they don't leave, and how do we continue to try and drive revenue. And we didn't have, it was a bootstrapped company primarily. We didn't have a whole lot of money to go spend, to go add tons of salespeople and marketing people and guinea pigs. So it was very tactical in nature, but it had to lead to a bigger part of it. So that was a good experience. We got the company sold in less than a year, and then at that point, I didn't really know what I was going to do. So after that, I started getting reached out to by a few people that I knew and say, "Hey, I need some help with sales, or I need some help figuring out how to build our market and build our product." And it was just ancillary types of stuff that I even got to a point where I didn't even know how to price it, and I don't know what an hourly rate is, or do I price a project? So that was a good learning experience, but I was fortunate to have that problem. And then I started, learning more about fractional leaders and what they do and how they do it, and the benefit that they can really have to smaller growing companies. And that's where I started to position myself more as a fractional chief revenue officer, why it makes sense, but then also trying to properly name the chief revenue officer, which isn't just somebody leading sales. Leading sales and growth has to do with marketing. It has to do with customer service, customer experience, customer success. And if you don't own all three of those, then you're really diminished in trying to own revenue. Not to say that there's no merit in a VP of sales or even a chief sales officer, not at all. But there's so much more to the puzzle of looking at revenue growth than just, like I said before, hiring salespeople and throwing a quota to them. It's a hell of a lot more different than that, and that's
Oh,
where I'm starting to position myself.
I think um, I think what I heard, like when I was listening to it and some of the research I was doing before we started to chat, it's almost like you're a conductor of an orchestra, and the organization, the revenue organization, is just like an orchestra, right? There's all of these sections and all of these people, and you have these first chairs and these soloists and things that you need to be able to conduct and help them see when they need to step up or when they need to stand up or when they right to make sure all those things are playing together at the same time. And I don't know how that if that really translates, but there's a lot of moving pieces to what you're describing. So if somebody's sitting in their car right now listening to this, what are the problems that they're experiencing that you can help them solve? I mean, I think that might help somebody recognize.
Yeah, there's two kind of high level ones, and it's whether or not they're proactive or reactive, and both are very, very valid. Proactive being companies that are looking to grow, and that may sound kind of cliche or like, yeah, of course, what companies don't want to grow? Well, there's plenty out there that don't, and
Right.
that's okay. There's no shame in that whatsoever. In fact, there's plenty of lifestyle businesses that are doing a damn good job. So, um, companies that want to grow, that are looking at growth, and the problem there is you can grow so many different ways. Trial and error structure. You can grow through partners. You can go through direct channels. You can grow through digital channels. All sorts of ways to grow. Um, there's also a lot of merit into growing into particular segments. So you can look at industry, you can look at country, geography, you can look at customer types. So often you have wide market or a big market and a small amount of resources to go tackle it. So the problems in the proactive side is you're trying to get it sequenced properly to grow in an efficient manner where your capital is being stretched to the proper limit to exacerbate the biggest type of return that you can get. So that's on the proactive side. On the reactive side is people that are in kind of like the oh shit mode of, I've missed numbers previously in the past. Um, I've hired people and they've churned. Things just aren't working, whether that's post COVID, post pandemic types of problems, but ultimately there's stagnation exists or there's simply declines that exist and they don't know how to solve it. Those are usually the high levels, proactive and reactive, but ultimately around revenue growth. The next step beneath that, where both of them are the problems really being addressed, are how to sequence and align all of these activities so that you're being purposeful and intentful. It's taking, if you've got some customers, figure out, why did those customers buy from you? Why have they bought again? Go to your customer success team or your customer experience team and get all of the feedback from them. Take that back to marketing. Make sure that we're distributing content or creating content that's exactly like that. And then have the sales team sing the same tune. If all three of those teams are in the same mark, that is what I think your orchestra or your conductor analogy is phenomenal, because if you have one group or even one instrument out of tune, you can hear it.
Hmm.
And that's exactly what this is you have problems that happen where marketing's generating content that's too fluffy and doesn't resonate at all with buyers. Sales teams trying to create their own content or create their own cadences and sequences, and they're trying maybe selling something that they don't even solve. And then customer success, customer service teams are trying to implement or deploy or support things that sales sold incorrectly. These problems exist every day. I'm sure you see this more than anybody.
Sure.
Is these are the sequence of events that happen, and that's what I help bind and prevent.
I mean, those I think you're 100% right. Those are common problems, and the idea of like you can hear some some instrument in the orchestra that's out of tune, right? That often sticks out. But if somebody's playing offbeat or they're playing the wrong tune, that becomes very problematic. And that stands out a little bit more for somebody like you or me to like, oh wow, that's right there is the problem. But that's not always apparent to that CEO or to a business owner who's trying to get to growth. So let me just like stop there for a second. When you say growth, they're trying to grow 50%. They're trying to double, right? I mean, we're talking about really growth over a period of time, right? Not just your
Yeah, I
10%
mean, it
year
could
over year.
be you could even look at 10 and 20%, especially for, companies that are on a downward spiral. 10% is significant, especially if they're down year over year or quarter over quarter. 10% is a pretty, net difference if they're declining 10% and you can turn that into positive 10, that's a 20%. And now
Yeah,
you're
that's a
setting the
20% bump.
stage for. Yep. So, but generally speaking, yeah, it's companies that are looking at that. And I equate this to, I think everybody's heard the term like hockey stick growth. But what often I see gets forgotten about is there's the blade part of the hockey stick, which takes time. It's not like you hire somebody and all of a sudden you're going to get revenue. You got to use that blade of that amount of time to get your shit together, start getting things in work, build sales process, build marketing processes, understand content creation, content distribution, understand demand generation, demand capture, and then you got to feed that to the sales team. You got to build that engine, and that takes a little bit so that you can get that exponential growth. And that's often where, it's not like, and I even tell this to clients, it's not like you're going to hire me and all of a sudden overnight it's going to sprinkle sales. It's going to take some time. And it's also about the investment you're going to make in building the team, training the team, hiring, whether it's an agency, an outsourcer, freelancers, internal staff to do the work, because we need to start prioritizing what work needs to be done. But ultimately, yes, it's somebody that's looking to grow a little bit, from a little bit to a lot to whatever their capacity is. I've got a client right now that's, we're just trying to get them to the couple $1 million mark, and there's a good exit there that they want to get to, and they're in the 600,000-700,000 range. So that's a good double. They're looking at doubling the company,
Hmm.
but net dollars isn't a whole lot of growth. So we sprinkle a little bit of stuff, and that's ultimately what we're going to
But
look at. So
there's an exit strategy. They know why they're trying to get there. So if it's 700,000 or 7 million, it doesn't really matter if there's a plan to when you get to that level, that next level. Now what do you want to do? Because
yeah, right.
that informs how you build the structure, right? Because you're really talking about building systems that are repeatable, that you can, once they're working and humming along, you could pour a little fuel in it, right, and keep it going, and then just step on the accelerator and keep it moving.
There you go.
Um,
Yep.
but if you don't have the proper infrastructure in place, that there's a disconnect along that path. You're going to have that hole, and that's what you're looking at. Is what you're bringing to the party is to help them see the things that they don't see, and then helping them understand the sequencing of what needs to get done first and what needs to get done second, and why that's important, and then telling the story repeatedly within the organization so that everybody understands it and everybody understands where you're going. I think that's and it doesn't matter for you. It doesn't matter if they're doing 750,000 or 750 million. You're still able to come in here and see this. It just becomes a broader a range of options
Yeah,
on
a
the larger
broader
side.
range in some cases, and also in some cases very specific. So yeah, I think that's the formula there. And my ideal customer is more than likely under the 20 million mark.
Hmm.
I've got a couple different packages for depending on the stage, but all in all, it's like you said, the growth number there has to be there, some kind of growth, and to achieve that. And then the second kind of trigger event is not only growth, but then understanding that you want to put the work in to do it. And again, not everybody's equipped to do that. When you look at bootstrapped companies, the benefit of a bootstrapped company is they don't have pressures. I mean, it's unless it's internally, excuse me, internally driven. So they can kind of go at their own speed, and maybe they don't want to go as fast, but it's kind of like what you said is, put your foot on the gas. Put your foot on the gas to the point, and then you also have the freedom and flexibility if you want to take a break for a second or pull over to a rest stop in the same analogy is and take a break, but then keep going. And that's a great experience I had with a client years ago. They were about 8.5 million. We took them to about 25 in less than 2 years. And
Nice.
it was just like he just wanted to kind of hang out for a second, and things were going well, and he wanted to build some better things, build some better products and delivery. He focused on systems and wanted to really look at his buying system and his support design system. So and that was great. He was beholden to nobody. He was the owner of the company, and it's great. And he's building a great business right now. So but we got there, and it was let's go. And he loved the journey. So so those are some of the different experiences.
I love it. I love it. And it, it, your journey is similar to mine, but wildly different, right? And I know that's an oxymoron, but you played in bigger corporate companies, and I stayed. My career is, smaller family type businesses that were, going from 8 to 12 million, and it was really personal. There was one company that was a family business that, I used to joke I competed against small organizations like Siemens, Honeywell, and Tyco. And I,
Yeah, very small companies.
and we could hold our own, right? Unless they wanted to flex their muscle. And it was a fun experience because there were battleships that needed to turn, right? And we were this little boat that could just navigate into any little cove that we wanted to, and be profitable. And we had a niche that we could defend, and it was fun. But there were these pieces that I learned just by listening to the gentleman who owned this company, like what he was really concerned about, and it helped me gain that business acumen about what's important about. It's not just about going and selling the widget. It's like that widget's got to get made. It's got to be profitable. It's got to be quality. You have to have the systems in place so things don't fall apart. And my sales team, because I was running a sales team, I remember there was a couple of summers where we get busy in the summertime. And I remember, like, I'd be in a leadership meeting, and it's like, we're capacity. We can't do any more. It's crazy. The sky is falling. I'm like, all right. Well, so we'll send the sales team home for the summer, right? You guys get caught up. We got, $6 million sitting in engineering waiting to get done. And so we'll go play some golf, and we'll come back. Let us know when you're
Right.
ready. And
There you go.
the owner was like, he would lose his shit when I made jokes like that. But the other people in the room were like, yeah, go ahead. That would be great, because then we wouldn't feel the pressure. But that pressure did was force those people to become more effective and more efficient, and figure out where they could get faster and better and without losing quality. Sometimes it meant adding people. Sometimes it meant your system is archaic, right? And we needed to stop doing things by hand. So it's fun from in the sales leadership seats, where you can kind of sit back and, if you're observant, pay attention to these other things that are occurring. And then those don't go away. They're in your head, so that when you become entrepreneurs like us, we're able to bring this stuff to the party. I was at an EO event, an entrepreneurial organization event,
Oh, yeah.
and the lady that runs our chapter she's like, I am absolutely unemployable. Not because she's not competent, not because she's not
Right.
skilled, but she's like, nobody's going to tell me what to do anymore. Like, there's no way that could happen. She just has troubles talking to a client and saying, no, we're not doing that, because that's silly, right? We're not. That's she can do that and still keep clients, but and I think that's where you've had the similar journey, where you take all this stuff you've learned over the years, and now you can apply it in the right situation. So it becomes, to me, it's the challenge that we have is explaining what we do in outcomes to our prospective clients, right? And make it really simple and clear for them to be like, yeah, I have that problem, and we need to fix that. And it's getting that to be really, 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 really clear in a very, very small niche. And that's the hardest part of what we do, I think, from the sales perspective, is not trying to be all things to all people, but dialing that in to that little niche. And the better we can do that, the more effective we can be, I think. Just my not so
Yeah,
humble opinion.
definitely. And that I think that applies in just about any functional area in a company is you can apply that same type of process into development, engineering, human resources, finance, accounting, product development, marketing, you name it. I think the same methodology can be employed anywhere. And that's where I attribute a lot of my, when I was in the call center in leadership roles is you learn so much. And I can't even talk about what was learned, but you're interacting with everybody. You're interacting with HR. That's a people business. People are your product. So HR, I grew to be a huge fan of HR and understand the value, not only because my mother is a retired HR professional and my wife is an HR manager, but being in the trenches there, you really understand how you lean on them. HR and recruiting is, I think every current era is always about recruiting as a challenge, talent acquisition, talent retention. So when you start taking that process to people, whether it's buyers or customers, prospects or employees, the same
Hmm.
methodologies can be you got to go pretty narrow, and it's not a one size fits all.
It's not, and I think that's always a challenge for us, especially somebody's early entrepreneurial journey. Like we're farther along down the road, but I still find myself like, what the hell am I doing? This is not what I should be doing. And once I'm in, I'm not going to back out of it, but I got to make sure I don't put myself in situations. So, and that's why I like doing this podcast, because I'm meeting people that like, you know what, I'm not a good fit for what you need. And it's important what you need to solve, but I'm not the right tool, right? I'm a hammer, I'm a screwdriver, right? Whatever the right metaphor is,
Hmm.
but you need this thing over here, and that might be Ed. So let me introduce you to Ed, and he can help you solve that problem, right? To me, I've added value to
Yeah.
somebody else I know, and I've added value to that potential entrepreneur, and that's a good thing. And that's, to me, that's what it should be about, is adding value to somebody, whether it's I see a fee out of it or not. It's about doing the right thing. So
Right.
um,
And that's the epitome of what I believe selling is that you're trying to help buyers make the best buying decision. Sometimes that buying decision isn't you. And
right.
sometimes it's somewhere else or someone else. And that's very tough to tell a commissioned person. But that's ultimately that's where discovery is so important to say
Oh God.
what really is the problem. And I can solve maybe a portion of that, but it's probably a chicken and the egg kind of thing. Maybe there's something else first. And that's the whole, you're trying to help your buyer make the best buying decision. And the better you
That's
can
a
be at that, I believe in karma, and it comes around twofold.
but that's a great way great way to describe it, is helping the buyer make the best buying decision for them. Because I look at the other side of that coin from the salesperson's perspective, is like, you need to be ruthlessly disqualifying buyers because
Mhm.
you're not going to deliver value to them. And if you can't do that, and as soon as you figure it out, then you have to be honest, right? You don't tell people to go pound sand, but you like, it doesn't sound like this is a good fit. And then you can talk about it, right? Honestly and openly. And buyers aren't used to that from salespeople, right? They're going to like,
For
one,
sure.
be shocked, and then they're either going to try to help you see why it is, or they're going to say, you know what, I think you're right. Thank you, right? And now you've elevated the profession by doing the right thing. So I think you and I could talk about sales for a couple hours. So
Yes.
let's talk
That's
about
why our,
something.
our next uh, our next meeting is going to be at a cigar lounge where we've got plenty of time and plenty of whiskey.
Yeah. So let's talk about something important, about your relationship. So we know you have a relationship with cigars,
Yes.
and we talked a little bit in the green room beforehand. We're both fans of Padrones, but is there is there a story, like how you got started? Is there a story with why you why you continue with cigars? I mean, I kind of there's always something there, and I'm just trying to figure out what that is with Ed. Like,
Yeah,
what's your
so I
attraction?
I blame my son for this. Um, or maybe I tout my son for this. So my kids are older, they're 21 and 25. So my 25-year-old, during the pandemic, I had smoked cigars very informally prior to that, but during the pandemic, for Father's Day in 2020, for Father's Day he got me a couple cigars, and he knew a little bit about them, but not a whole lot. So we sat on the deck and we both smoked a cigar. And this was almost 3 years ago, and um, it was a good bonding time with him. And I wouldn't say we were close, but we were cordial. He's how sometimes you got good relationships. They get older, they go through
They
adolescence, they
change.
know everything, and then they go, yeah, right. So now he's at this other stage in life, and um, so ironically, he's a music education major. He's a jazz guitarist, a phenomenal jazz guitarist,
Awesome.
and so the whole music thing resonates with me when you were talking about that earlier. But it was a great bonding time for us to just talk and sit on the deck. So then I wound up looking online and joined a couple cigar clubs and started to get a sample of different things. I would go to a store and buy a few different ones, and that became our thing. We smoked a few cigars on the deck that year, and then the rest was history. And that's when it started. I started to find things that I liked, things that I didn't, um, and then it was cigar clubs for a little bit to try and find a sampling of things. Go into local shops once they started opening up in 2020 in the lounges, and having conversations with the workers here, the people here, of like, what do you like? Why do you? I mean, that was just the whole butterfly effect of what drew my fascination to cigars. And so yeah, it was really my son and the Father's Day gift that he got, and it was our bonding time that was seems a little bit inconsequential or insignificant, but it was a big deal to me,
It was a
and
huge
that's
deal.
what started.
It was a huge deal. You started without realizing it, that day, you started a tradition that
Yeah,
I, I, I bet will carry on with your son for a long time, where you
for
can go
yeah.
sit on the deck and that'll turn into like, hey, Dad, I need a piece of advice. Hey, Dad, I'm thinking about, marrying this person. I'm thinking about job. I'm thinking about traveling, joining this band. What,
Yep.
whatever that is, even if it's nothing, it's just it's a bonding experience. And when you can do it with one of your kids, that's a very cool
Yeah, and the two cigars,
story.
I'll never forget this. The two cigars he brought home was the Monte Cristo Classic Series was the one I smoked, and he smoked a Perdomo Habano,
Okay.
or Habano wrapper. It was a Perdomo 10th. Um,
Yep. Yellow
so
wrapper.
didn't like the Monte Cristo. I know the classic was a yellow wrapper. The Perdomo, he smoked that. I don't remember that, but I remember it said Habano, and it was a spicy cigar, it's a peppery type of cigar. So I didn't really like it in the beginning. Now I'll kind of smoke them a little bit, but those are the two, and I started. The Monte Cristo Classic was great, so I started finding mild to the Connecticut wrapper type cigars, and I like those. Then I started stepping it up to the medium
Hmm.
body, and then so that was my whole progression. So who knows? If he would have gotten two peppery cigars, we may not be here talking. I may not
Yeah.
be a cigar guy if that was so. That was a little bit of chance that kind of built the fate of my cigar fascination. And I mentioned this to you when we got connected. So we got connected by a mutual acquaintance, Paul Fuller. So Paul is here in Columbus with me. I've known him for a little while, but he was the one who told me that you have a Sales and Cigars podcast. Well, in 2020, later that year, a buddy and I, who I hired him at a previous company when I was the CRO, he and I started to get together for cigars, and he's like, you know what, we should invite some other sales guys. So we did, and then he's like, we should just call it Sales and Cigars. So we had a Sales and Cigars event, and that was our thing. Is we would go to different lounges and invite 5 or 6 sales guys. We would all talk shop, smoke cigars, and drink. And then Paul, I think I made a mention of that on a post, and then Paul commented and it's like, you need to know Walter. He's got a Sales and Cigars podcast. I was like, well, son of a bitch, this is a match made in heaven.
Yeah, Paul's I've known Paul a while, um, and he where his in his seat at Membrane, I engage with him. I'm going to see him next week in Boston at an OMG conference, and
Okay.
they're one of the sponsors for the conference. So yeah, I've got a couple of projects going with Paul now, and he's not a big cigar guy, but he's good at
Hmm.
connecting people, and he's solid at sales. So it's cigars are one of those things that we talked about it before. It can bring people together. It can make connections for things. It can create traditions. I started smoking cigars on a golf course, um, and I think I've told this story once before. But the guy that I started playing golf with, I met in sales training. Right, we both were taking the same sales training. We become friends, and then he was a really good golfer, like a single digit handicap, and I
Wow.
would like I've never played golf before. So we went out, and the funny thing is that he started breaking out cigars because you know I'm shooting 120 on 9, and he's shooting 77 on 18. So he's waiting around a lot. So he needs a couple of sticks just to keep himself occupied while I'm walking around
Right.
hitting balls. Um, because I would literally take two clubs and go over to my ball and then hit it, and he would just be driving along, talking shit along the way.
Right.
Um, but that's how I got introduced to it, through a social thing,
Yeah.
and my wife will say I got two bad habits in the same summer: cigars and golf.
Right.
Um,
And go, there you go. Well, that's so funny story is that year in 2020 is, I don't know where this is legal, but if I were to ever open an establishment, I would call it Three Vices because the three vices I picked up in 2020 were cigars, bourbon, and guns.
mm.
So if I could have an establishment that has a shooting range, a bar, and a cigar lounge, I would call it Three Vices. I don't know that that's a great recipe for a business, but those are the three vices I picked up in 2020.
So there's a gun shop, a range. It's a shop, a range, and a restaurant. Um, not too far from, like, one town over from where I live, and he's trying to get a liquor license right now.
Interesting.
Um, and he's getting a lot of pushback um, from people. And he's like, he's gonna have rules. Like, if you got a band and you're on the range, right, you can't get a drink. It's just
You can't get a
that
drink, yeah.
simple. But they're worried about liability and such.
Yeah.
And but
Well, the other thing too is controlled access. If you have controlled access, that helps too. So there's a prevention of if you can
well, he
key
does.
card or secure the gun range, yeah.
You can't get into the range at this establishment without somebody looking at you and buzzing you in, right? Because
Yeah.
once you're in the range, you're in the range with other fellas and gals with weapons. So, but yeah, you're not having, and the way he was building this was like, you can't get to the restaurant until you're on your way out, right? And you can't go
Yeah.
back. So he had a plan, whether it's a great plan or not a great plan, but the idea is is not there. Now, what he doesn't have, which might be easier for him to get, is creating a cigar lounge on the property that is separate from the restaurant because you can't have cigars with the restaurant. Um, so I like it. That's
Yeah.
my dream.
That's
My dream is
interesting.
to have
That's
a
interesting.
my dream is to have a cigar shop when I kind of get close to wanting to retire, where I can just, have a place where it's comfortable, where people can
Hmm.
come work out. There's a bar, it's engage. It's easy for people to engage in conversation, network. Somebody wants to bring a client in to have a conversation. There's a special place that they can go. That's kind of what I've got envisioned in my head. Um, so
Yeah, that's neat. Are you going to call it the Blue Lounge?
you know what? I haven't really gotten that far. I mean, the Blue Smoke Lounge is sort of what
Blue Smoke Lounge, yeah.
I created
Is your
that.
area. Yeah.
like, yeah, I created that and it's now become my office. But that's a that's a that's a strong possibility. But the other thing is the sales and cigars idea, right? Because I could continue this for a long time and just set up a little studio in there and talk shit from my own
Yeah, there you
cigar line.
go.
That wouldn't suck. So, all
Nice.
right.
Very cool.
So, is there some place? What's the best way? If somebody heard you say something smart and they want to reach out to you, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Yeah, I'll give two. My website, bluechipcro.com. I'm proud of that for a couple ways. It's very, very simple and, and at times a little vague, but it's kind of the perfect blend in my opinion. So it's a good snapshot into who I am, what I do. I've got a blog that's on there. Sometimes I'm good, sometimes I'm not, consistency wise, but that's a good spot. And then it links to my LinkedIn. I'm fairly active on LinkedIn on my individual profile. So please follow along, engage. I'm a big advocate for using LinkedIn for the social aspect of it. I used to use a hashtag lazy liker. So don't be a lazy liker. Throw an opinion, throw a thought. I love disagreement. I do it because it helps me learn a lot when I throw an opinion and get some feedback on it. So engage with me on LinkedIn. And if you hear from this episode, add a note on the connection saying, hey, heard you on Sales and Cigars with Walter. So I'd like to know where a lot of my connections come from, how I engaged with them. So it's a good reference point for me.
Cool. So we're going to have all that in the show notes for people to track you down and just do a click and they can get to you. So Ed, this was fun, just as I suspected. So thank you very much. And we're going to coordinate some, I don't know if getting to Columbus, I might be able to get to Westchester, Ohio, but
Yeah,
maybe
I'll meet you in
Lexington, maybe
Cincy or Lexington. There you go. If let me know. That's a 3 hour drive, and I can get there fairly easily.
and we have everything we need there: cigars, good weather, and bourbon.
And bourbon, definitely. And I got a good podcast I can listen to on the drive down.
There you go, man. I appreciate that. Thank you.
All
Appreciate
right.
it.
Thanks, Walter.